All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm just going to give you a little bit of my background so you know where I'm coming from and what I'm bringing as I talk to you about what I've done. I've been in higher ed for 23 years. I have a master's degree in literature, and my doctorate is in curriculum and instruction with an emphasis on teaching reading and writing to post-secondary ed students. I've taught at a variety of institutions, from community colleges to technical schools to the university setting, private liberal arts. So I've really been working with students of a lot of different backgrounds. I've taught graduate, undergraduate, traditional, non-traditional, online, face-to-face, hybrid, variety of different settings. I've run learning centers, reading centers. I currently at Clark University, I will teach some writing and lit courses, but my primary role is as the Director of Learning Services to work with supporting students. I also oversee the probation and warning program here at Clark University, help support faculty in finding good curriculum strategies, present in classrooms. I will develop and tailor workshops to their needs. I reach out on all of the academic concerns. I also meet one-on-one with all students from grad to undergrad. I teach the college study strategy course. I have about 6 sections of that, and I've now been developing a 8-week course that I kind of reserve for students who are struggling to try to put them into a session 2. And I've been trying to also develop some micro courses to target their needs. A lot of different things that I do, a lot of different hats that I wear and serve on different committees. So that's me, that's my background. I'm going to now jump into what you've been wanting to hear about. So the pedagogy behind some of this, and I know a lot of you are familiar with it, so I won't spend a lot of time, but I do want to start with the background. As you know, learning begins with the self. It starts with the self system, and when I start with teaching students in the college study strategy curriculum, a lot of those students, they're either the ones that have been identified as the ones who are going to struggle, or many of them have been placed on academic probation. So they come in feeling inadequate in some way, shape, or form. They have negative tapes running through their head about why they can't succeed. So as you know, until they activate a system, a self system that believes they can learn, there's nothing that I can give them that is going to help them learn. So we have to first help them believe that they can learn. And I tell them that, and it's really important that they understand that, and that they form a positive, healthy self-image of themselves and realize that they need to believe that they can. And I also give them the literature behind that. I talk to them about Bandera. I talk to them about Marzano and Mead. I call them academic scholars because that's what they are. And they like that. They like to be respected as learners and realize that they can do that. And they start to engage in positive self-talk from day one. I talk to them about growth mindset. I talk to them about metacognition. I talk to them about grit. There's a really good TED Talk online of Angela Duckworth that I play for them, talking about what grit is and how successful people have grit, that you're not necessarily born to be a very intelligent, successful person, that there's research showing successful people are people that don't give up, that you fail, but then you figure out why you fail, and you figure out what you need to do to be successful and what you're going to do differently in order to succeed. And you, over time, continue to try new strategies, and you reach out to people, and you use your resources, and you have grit. Those are the people that do well. And so my job is to help them figure out what resources are there, what tools are there, what strategies are there, what's going to work for them. And so over the course of the semester, that's what I do. I help them activate their self. I help them find purpose. I help them believe in what they can do. And we set goals, and we engage metacognition over time as they're applying strategies to their existing courses. They engage in cognitive dissonance. As you know, that first year is so important. They come in believing that there is one way, there's this set of truth, and that the professor is going to fill them with knowledge, and they're going to repeat it back. That's not what college is. And a lot of times they don't even have the resources or the strategies to do what they need to do to be successful. And as you know, about week 3, they want to pack their bags and leave. So it's up to us to help them realize, and I will tell them around week 3, congratulations, if you feel like you can't do this, you're right on track. This is exactly how you should be feeling. This is how students feel. Now let's figure out what we're going to do to keep you here and what you need to do. This is how college students tend to feel about week 3, and they start to feel this sense of relief. And again, we go back to their goals, we go back to their plan, we go back to the learning plan, and we start to work together to help them find success. You'll find that most, all of these resources here, Perry, Erickson, Dweck, Angela Duckworth, all of these researchers will reiterate much of this same stuff that I'm talking about, as I'm sure that you're familiar with. Just wanted to review this as we move forward. So, in addition to doing the college study strategy class, I've been trying to take this and put it into some of our high stake courses. I'm going to talk to you in a few minutes about what those are, but what it looks like when I integrate it is I take the course, I work with the professor, and we talk about how we can integrate this into the class. I give them a lot of these strategies, and I also plug them into the academic coaching resources that we have in our academic resource center. And we also infuse the LASSI, which is part of the curriculum. If you haven't heard of what the LASSI is, it's a nationally normed test that other universities also use. It can be helpful because it gathers data, so you can use it for comparative and data purposes to look at growth and compare yourself with other universities in research. But what's most useful is it gives the student a quantitative measure to compare against the qualitative measure that they've already done. I have them do a self-assessment of themselves over a lot of the things about how they feel about themselves as a student, and how they feel they do with things like studying and test taking and reading and writing, and then answer questions like, what kinds of strategies are you going to use to help yourself with this? What do you need from me? Where are you weak? Where are you strong? How are you going to use your strengths to address some of these weaknesses? And then when they take this LASSI, that also has them answer a lot of questions, and then it will give them quantitative data measuring them against other students all over the country who have taken this. They can look at where they are on a scale of 1 to 99, which is helpful, not because it makes them feel bad about themselves as a student, because it says, okay, here are some areas I really need to address if I want to be successful in college. So if on the scale, and I will see this quite frequently, they get like a 1 out of 99 on SMI, that means their ability to look at selecting main ideas. That means they're probably going to struggle with reading and probably going to struggle with writing, right? Because if you can't select main ideas, you're probably going to struggle with writing summaries. You're going to struggle with research writing. Your reading and writing go hand in hand. It's probably something you're going to want to address, and you're going to want to address it quickly. You're probably also going to struggle with the INFP score, which is your ability to think critically. INFP means information processing, which means critical reading is probably something you're also going to need to address, and address pretty quickly. Good thing is, the class addresses reading strategies. It addresses critical reading. It addresses textbook reading. It gives you tools for how to do that and how to do it quickly. So one of the goals would be, getting better with selecting main ideas, finding textbook reading strategies, finding critical reading strategies. And the book and our class has those, and they can start to work on those as specific goals. They will take the test again, a post test. That's included with the LASI, a pre and a post. So they take it again. I usually have them do it around week 14 so that stress from finals isn't going to impact their self-assessment score. And oftentimes they'll see growth, sometimes all the way up to a 99 at times. That's exciting for them because it shows that they're taking specific strategies from the class, plugging them in, and they're finding that they're meeting their goals and they're finding growth over time. So that's something that they can do, and it's also a good data measurement to see, is what we're doing in the class effectively meeting what they want it to meet. The curriculum has been specifically targeted to go over the things of the LASI. The LASI has things like attitude, anxiety, motivation. I mentioned information processing, selecting main ideas, time management, study strategies, use of resources. One of the things I want them to do is connect with resources on campus. We know that that's important. Self-testing, test taking, and concentration. So how do you fit this into and integrate it into classes? The ones that I specifically have targeted was our Perspectives of Nursing class, because those of you who happen to be teaching nursing classes know students who are in nursing have to take an NCLEX, and you might end up with a degree, but if you don't pass the NCLEX, you don't get to be a nurse, right? So making sure that they pass that test is really important. So one of the things we build into it is test taking strategies, and also specifically learning how to study on higher levels of learning, specifically with Bloom's taxonomy, which is really, really important. Students come into college, many of you, all of you here who are listening know they don't really know how to study. And if they do, what they typically do is use a flashcard, or they might use a Quizlet, which is really frustrating. I could rant about Quizlet, but I won't. They don't move beyond the knowledge level of understanding. They don't know how to go through knowledge to comprehension, to application, and up to the higher levels of how to apply and how to think things through onto the higher levels where people's lives might actually be at stake in second decisions. So this is where we really work with them to help them anticipate and tease out how to do that in in test-taking strategies. The other thing that this was helpful for us, and I'll show you as we go through some of the data, is it helps us understand emotional intelligence factors. So the attitude, anxiety, and motivation helps us get at emotional intelligence and inner and intrapersonal skills, which again, nursing students have to have. This helps them address, those are things that are also impacting retention and giving them strategies to improve in those areas. In the course of perspectives of nursing, which has so much stuff built into it, the way that we built it into the class was I have my academic coaches work with those students outside of the class to fulfill the curriculum, and then they report back to me and the instructor that they've fulfilled the weekly meetings, and then the online discussion board is built into the class, and that fulfills 10% of the class. They take the LASI at the beginning, and then they take it again at the end. The nursing professor this semester reported back that she was so excited about how well the students did and saw great progress as a result of this being integrated. We did a 6-year longitudinal study of the perspectives of nursing, the intro course, also integrated it into the DNP program to see over time the factors and if it helped with retention, and then also built it into our intro to PT course, and then the DPT with those students taking the test to see if it made a difference. We're still going through all of that data. I'll show you some of the data that I found with the LASI and what I've done, but we've still got lots and lots of data to go through. And then I'm going to talk to you in a few minutes about how I built reading labs into biology to build in some of the reading portion, because reading, I'm sure you're finding, is also greatly impacting student success. So some of the preliminary findings on the LASI that I found interesting. The lowest scores that I found when I was looking at themes and trends tended to be the information processing, motivation, which gets at self-efficacy, gets towards that self-system we were talking about. Time management, I'm sure that doesn't surprise you. When I look at student concerns that come in with students across the whole university, time management is probably one of the number one ones, and students report themselves that time management is what they struggle with the most. Selecting main ideas, again, that gets at reading, which we talked about. Then when we looked at when they took the post-test, the highest areas of change, of growth at the post-test was motivation, which was really exciting and interesting because that was one of the lowest. So that was showing me that the course curriculum was helping impact one of the lowest areas. Information processing was the second highest. So again, one of the lowest was being impacted by the curriculum. Time management, again, this was exciting because that was one of the lowest. Self-testing came up, which was good. That meant they were coming up with some good study strategies, and then selecting main ideas, which was reading. So again, one of the lowest was showing up as one of the highest areas of change. So I was really encouraged to see that. Another finding that I saw was that students with low EMI, so that's what I'm using for emotional intelligence, and I was classifying the categories of motivation, anxiety, and attitude. Those scores seem to be less likely to be successful in the programs. So if they had really low emotional intelligence scores, they tended to not stay in the programs or not complete them. That really didn't surprise me much. Or they tended to be placed on probation or change majors. Changing majors, though, I wouldn't see as a bad thing. We're finding that students who change their majors are more likely to be retained overall in the university, whereas students who resist changing majors tend to not be retained. But seeing an EMI that's low would indicate that they need to be connected and find more success. So having this indicator on a LASI is something that's helpful. I did see that transfer students tended to be lower on their scores with the information processing, study skills, and reading comprehension. Again, this didn't surprise me because I see oftentimes that the transfer students, at least here, because we have a lot of athletes, we have 88% athletes. Sometimes those transfer students are the athletes that will transfer over and over again if they're not playing, and they're transferring because they want to play. So they will also be the ones who are not always real successful or not invested in finding those strategies to be successful. And then there seemed to be a correlation between low information processing and selecting main ideas and reading and writing. Again, that did not surprise me. Reading and writing is something that I teach, so I know that there's a strong correlation between students who struggle with reading and writing. And then I wanted to talk to you about the reading lab. This was something that I piloted last semester, and I am going to continue to pilot into other classes. But one of the biology professors took me up on my offer to integrate a reading lab into a class. And I went into 2 sections over the course of 7 weeks on Fridays into both of her sections of biology. And I really let her take the lead on how she wanted to implement this. So she came up with the method of how we were going to do it. And I shared a reading journal template that I use in my literature class. It's a reading strategy that I came up with that I call OCD, where I have students annotate for observations, connections, and discussion questions, and then I give them a template for them to note them as a way to think more deeply and critically about texts. So she had them do that with the biology textbook, and the idea was that they, on Fridays, would have completed the reading journal and be ready to discuss it, and I would facilitate the discussion and model how to do that type of critical reading in biology, as students really tend to struggle with thinking critically and deeply, and how to read critically and deeply, and how to study and think on multiple levels with Bloom's taxonomy. So that was our idea, and she wanted to start it as early as possible to give them as much as they could, and I was also going to infuse the other strategies as needed. So we did get IRB approval, and we were keeping an autoethnography journal of our own teaching as we went as well. We had them fill out a self-assessment, and I will be sharing that self-assessment if you want to use it as well. I also had them do a learning plan, and I also do this in my college study strategy course as well. And it's also something that I have shared on listservs and developed during COVID as a way for students to be more empowered of their learning, especially when they're learning online. And during COVID, when they were online, I'm sure you're all familiar with the fact that students don't really read a syllabus very well. They don't know how to navigate a syllabus. when I work with students who have received student concerns, the first thing I do is I have them pull out the syllabus and I read through it with them. And oftentimes they're pulling this crumpled piece of paper out and they don't know where things are. And I have to show them. That's very, very typical. I know this doesn't surprise you at all. So one of the first things I do with students who struggle is I give them this learning plan template that leads them through how to take charge of their learning by going through a syllabus and how to pull the things out and what they're going to do based on what the syllabus is asking of them, how they're going to take charge of their learning, what strategies they're going to use if they want to achieve the grade that they want. What are they going to do based on this particular situation? How are they going to read? How are they going to study? How often are they going to study? What are they going to put in place to be successful? So that was something else that we worked through at the very beginning of the semester. The self-assessment, what goals are they going to put in place? What plan are they going to create? And I guided them through that. And we also had a SWAG, which is our form of supplemental instruction, stands for study with a guide. And the biology coach is a biology major who sat in there, and we introduced them to the biology coach, who had the planned sessions that they could also access outside of the class as built into their learning plan as well. This is very much along the lines of metacognition, right? Like, based on what you know about yourself, what do you need to do to be successful? How are you going to learn? And we revisited the self-assessment in week 4. After they had a test. How did the test go? What would you do differently based on this test? How are you going to study differently? How are you going to readjust your learning plan? And again, I will share these with you after the session, so that you can use them if you want. What surprised us is how much they needed with strategy. I mean, we knew that they would need strategies, but in the sessions and in the self-assessments, they really used the self-assessment as a tool to share their needs. So they shared a lot, and I commented on it and the professor commented on it back, and it became like a communication tool. They shared about how they needed to be taught. They shared about their learning needs. They shared a lot about mental health, They shared a lot about technology needs. They shared about their reading needs. They shared about how much they didn't get in high school. There was a lot of deficit. So in addition to the reading journal sessions of discussion, I would go in on those Fridays and give them specific strategies based on what they needed in addition to the discussion. And there was also a lot shared about their inability to discuss and work with other students, and a desire for oral communication, which again is something that came out of COVID. And I had known last year and had made a goal for myself in the Learning Center to help students learn how to talk to each other again. So getting them into small groups and facilitating this discussion was something that was really, really needed and really, really helpful. And teaching them how to interact with one another really was needed. We had to teach them how to interact with one another. And they would come up to me after these sessions and they would thank me. They would personally thank me. They would say, thank you so much for coming in here. This was so helpful. And so I was the one facilitating learning, and then we had the biology professor as the content expert. And so we would bounce back and forth off each other, and it was really, really helpful and really, really productive. But I would infuse things in like Bloom's taxonomy, how to study, on higher levels of learning, and different strategies for Bloom's taxonomy, how to read, reading strategies in addition to the OCD. When they had a writing assignment, they had specific questions, and some would come into my office and say, hey, we're really struggling with this, could we do this at the Friday session? And I would do that in their Friday session. It was a very go with the flow. What do you need? This is what I'm going to do on those Fridays. And sometimes we did it. The one session we did a post-test analysis, and what changes are you going to do? So very, very heavy metacognition built into it, and them really putting on the board their questions and what they needed, and really, really good digging in. Was it perfect? Was it ideal? No, but was it modeling what academic scholars do? Yes. And constantly telling them this is what academic scholars do. They liked it. I thought they were very engaged. Over time, they talked much more. Very mindful of making them get up and talk to other people, forcing them out of their paradigm. It was very uncomfortable for them, but that was good. That's what cognitive dissonance is. I think if we were to do it again, I wouldn't start week 1. I would probably start week 4. Because I don't think week 1 they actually knew they needed it yet, but week 4 they definitely did. So I think I've probably reached my limit of talking. Talked about what happens in a reading lab, and now I'm going to open it up to discussion.
Thank you so much, Gina.
Yeah.
Well, I do have some questions here. I encourage all the participants or all the attendees to use the Q&A or the chat function to ask questions as well.
Sure.
First question, you had mentioned a reading screening. Is there one other than Lassie?
I mentioned a what? Can you say that again, Ryan?
A reading screening?
A reading screening.
Are you familiar? Reading assessments, maybe?
I don't know that I had. Well, the Lassie has the information processing and the SMI score. So that's what we use for indicating if there's reading. I do teach reading strategies, but there isn't another reading test. No.
Okay. Do you find, in your experience, do you find instructors reaching out to you for advice as a reaction to student retention problems, or are they proactively reaching out to you?
Both. I would say both, but I get lots of reactions. Like I said, I respond to all the academic student concerns that come in, which are a lot.
I love that you involve the students in their goal setting. I think that's great. Who else are stakeholders in setting these goals? Are they instructors, department chairs?
In setting the goals?
Yeah.
I think both. I mean, I work with both I work with students, I work with the professors, I also work with the athletic coaches, I work with the with all of them. And I'm also part of the student concern committee, where we're also always trying to set goals. So I really think it's a team approach. But really, really, really trying to focus on empowering students as much as possible and put them in charge.
We're getting lots of feedback, lots of requests for these resources that you presented.
Yep, so, yep, they're going to get their resources.
You're going to be handing out, we'll give a self-assessment exercise.
And the learning plan, yeah, as well. Yep. And
So
the learning plan I shared on a listserv during COVID, and Rutgers put that on their website as well. So it's kind of a cool learning plan. I think you'll find it useful.
Perfect. How much time did you plan on taking for the meetings with students? Is it 30-minute sessions or
On Fridays, the Friday reading labs, or when I meet with them one-on-one?
I believe, Melanie, if you wanna maybe specify, but let's start with the Friday sessions.
The Friday reading labs were 50-minute sessions. When I work with students one-on-one, it's usually 30-minute sessions weekly. And my college study strategy class is a 50-minute class.
Great. And Melanie also wanted to know, she answered perfect. She wanted both, so thank you for that.
Sure.
Did you have a team that engaged with the students, or was it just you?
Say that again?
Did you have a team that engaged with the students, or was it just you?
When I went into the reading lab?
Yeah.
When I went into the reading lab, it was me and the biology professor. It was the two of us.
Perfect. James asks, what would you say is your favorite study strategy that you teach to your students? Do you have a favorite one?
Yeah, I think growth mindset and emotional intelligence, and really teaching them how to activate their self system, because I think that that's really where it all starts. Once they learn how to activate the self system and take charge of their own learning, everything else falls into place.
Great. And another one kind of along those same lines, what strategies have been successful to promote deeper level student learning? Do you have any other favorite ones, I guess?
I think Bloom's taxonomy is one of the most important. For example, there was a student who was, I mean, it works with all of them, but there was a student on the verge of being kicked out of the PT program, and she was sent to work with me, and we worked together. And when she finally stopped resisting using Bloom's taxonomy and started to listen to me, that you really have to learn on a higher level of learning, and it's hard. I get that it's hard. She stopped rewriting notes and doing all of this other stuff. She started to be one of the highest achieving students in the class, and she used it and passed her boards. So she was so ecstatic. She sent me a thank you, and we celebrated together. So it's really, really important. And those of you who, you know, especially those that, it's all of you know this, but those of you who are teaching nursing know exactly what I'm talking about too. I mean, with that whole NCLEX, it's a big burden on the student to pass that NCLEX, and you really got to learn how to use Bloom's taxonomy. And they resist because it's hard, but it's so much easier to do that than to keep resisting it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I just put in the chat, if you're interested in getting access to Gina's publication, just reply and we'll get it sent.
Yes.
You mentioned, I know, nursing and PT integration at Clark University. Are there any other disciplines that you or other adopters have implemented this in?
Not into the actual programs, but I go into classes on a regular basis and talk about these strategies and tailor it to the classes. Yes, all the time. And like I said, I'm the one that's constantly working with students who've been on probation, and the students tell me over and over, if every student had this, they wouldn't end up on probation. And, you know, that's more of an institutional battle that I would need to fight, but I work the cracks by getting it into programs.
And one final question, you had spoken about the student that needed to be convinced to change their mindset. With the Bloom's taxonomy, the importance of that. What other
Yes.
strategies do you use to help them change their mindset?
What other strategies?
Mhm.
Well, going back to the emotional intelligence, learning how to overcome distorted thought processes and change that self system is really what is important. One of the big ones, I just talked to a student about this yesterday when we had an intervention meeting. He had gone on probation, going into that all or nothing thinking, the distorted mind process. That's a really big one. Comparative thinking, and this is one you'll find in nursing and PT all the time because they're really, really competitive students. They're high achievers, and a lot of them have never struggled before. They've always done really, really well, and then they get into nursing or they get into PT, and for the first time ever, they find themselves not doing well on a test, and they see other people doing better than them, and then they compete against each other, and they get into this comparative thinking, and then they get really, really anxious, and they think they can't do it. And they're in my office and they're in tears and they don't know what to do, and they want to fall back on what they've always done, which is using their flashcards or their Quizlet, and I have to tell them that's not going to work, and you're not going to pass an NCLEX. And again, they want to fight it because it takes time, but good learning takes time. So again, getting through those distorted thought processes, getting through those quick fixes, because quick fixes don't work, band-aids don't work. But again, I do also understand most of these students, and especially here, because I told you 88% of them are athletes, a lot of them are also paying for their own education. So they're stretched, right? They're working full-time jobs, they're a full-time student, and they are the full-time athlete. So trying to help them balance all of those things is also really, really difficult. And then the other thing that we talk a lot about, procrastination, and helping them understand that procrastination doesn't mean that they're lazy, because people don't procrastinate out of laziness. It's some kind of emotional barrier usually, or a distorted thought process that causes them to procrastinate. And again, that's built into the curriculum. So identifying what barrier is there, what emotional roadblock is there, that they need to overcome, is really what's important. And this is all really, really, really good, helpful things for them to do also, because when they learn how to overcome this, then they can help others as well. And that's all part of that self system, and growing in inter and intrapersonal skills, and learning that it's not a bad thing. Failure isn't a bad thing. Growth isn't a bad thing. This is something that's a life skill that we all do. And we help others once we learn how to do that, and we learn how to talk to other people. It's just changing the way we talk to ourselves.
Super helpful advice. Gina, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan. It's been good.
And to all of our attendees, thanks so much for attending this webinar. And more importantly, thanks for making a sincere impact on students and society as a whole. I really appreciate it. In the next day or two, you'll receive a link to the recording of this webinar. In addition, Gina will be providing you a self-assessment exercise from our publication, as well as a learning plan that you can utilize in tomorrow's course. So super excited about that. I'll get this sent out later today or tomorrow. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.